the mindset that needs to change around it. We've been so conditioned that death is a promotion to another realm and to another state of being. And that's a good thing. That's what it's been presented as. Whereas when it talks about Jesus bringing life and immortality to light through this good news, and Jesus saying, well, you don't need to die in John 6, you don't need to die. Because most people have died, it's so hard to believe that. And therefore our whole understanding that, well, everyone from virtually as soon as they can talk are conditioned with, well, you're going to die one day. It's like, that's just ingrained into everybody, isn't it? So it's not just a religious concept, it's a societal concept. Well, death is inevitable. Of course, some people try and cheat death through their own efforts. So they will, the eternal flame and all the stuff, eternal potion or whatever that you can take. And there's all sorts of stories in there. But people's pursuit, those now who die, have their heads chopped off and put into cryostasis or something. So one day their consciousness can be revived. They're all trying nanotechnology, trying to eliminate death. All of that is obviously our best efforts to do it, rather than actually just realizing that death has no part in us. But obviously we have to deal with the physical body, because our soul and spirit aren't going to die anyway. It's only the physical body that's the issue. Therefore we sort of, from dust to dust. You're going to go back to the dust one day, as if that was God's intention from the first place. Well, no, it wasn't. So Jesus sort of rebalanced that and said, well, you don't need to die.
Amen.
If you eat my flesh and drink my blood. Now, again, that's become ritualized into, well, only if you take communion as a ritual. And then it's been spiritualized as well, because it's really only, it means spiritually you won't die. Well, actually, it's physically, but it really wasn't. When he talked about eating his flesh and drinking his blood, it was a full embracing of who he was. Obviously not literally eating his flesh and drinking his blood. And we're sort of taking on communion as a sort of an element of that, but it goes beyond just sort of communion as a thing into living with his breath, his life. Everything about him is life. There is no death in him. And that takes on a different connotation to it, I feel. Now, obviously, our physical body may have things attached to it and within our DNA, which are reflecting of our earthly inheritance rather than our heavenly one. So that does need changing. So it's not just a mindset change. There's also a physical transformation of any death within our cells. And hence then our cells need to be renewed and not destroyed. And therefore the ability of our cells to renew themselves need to be restored. Therefore they need to learn how to communicate what it is that brings about that change and restoration. And then the things within our cells that within normal sort of thoughts will lead to death, all of those need to be dealt with physically, as well as just, well, how? Well, yes, you can see it as, well, I'm breathing in his life all the time, and therefore I'm in a state of continual renewal and restoration. But does that mean that we will have the same physical body forever? No, because I think there's a limitation to our physical body that Adam didn't have, in that his spirit was around his body, not the other way around. So there needs to be a restoration of the balance of relationship between spirit, soul, and body that God intended, that our bodies and spirit and soul would come back into the correct balance and harmony and design that God had for it. So Jesus, when he died, his physical body died. He had a resurrection body that seemed to have certain abilities that may have been different from his physical body while he was alive, but he had the capacity to choose to do the things that afterwards was different than he did before. He still moved through people, he still disappeared, he still was able to do the things, but his body was different. And I do think there is a transformation of the body that is taking place and will take place that will bring about a different relationship between spirit and soul and body than we have now. So you could say he had a resurrection body. We died with him and we were raised with him, and we're in the process of that being fully formed in us. But our thinking can stop it. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So if you think in your heart that death is the answer, then you will probably die. So our thinking does have to be in alignment for our, I guess, for the outworking to take place. I would say that that's probably where I am with it. It's not just about, well, I just think of it and it's going to be. I think there's a process of our whole body being renewed, but there's also a process of the relationship between spirit, soul, and body also being transformed into what it should have been. And that might have different ways of outworking. I don't know. You know, do I have a resurrection body now? Yes, in one sense, because I have died and was resurrected with him.
Amen.
But in another sense, my mind is coming into an agreement with what that means, and my thinking has an effect on that. Hence the renewal of my mind to agree with God about my physical state needs to take place. You know, but there's not been a lot of sort of history of teaching that or experiencing it that people can draw on. Right. You know, to say, well, where's the testimony? Right. Now, there are some people who are alive after hundreds of years because they have sort of embraced some of this, but then where are they? People talk about them, that not many people have met them, you know, so it's quite difficult, you know, to sort of put a hard, fast thing on it. So I do believe that it starts with the belief and then brings about transformation of the physical nature of our being, so that the cells of our being, all of our thing, is in alignment with God's intention. So yeah, that's really where I would be with it. Now, then that poses the question, well, what about aging? You know, are we going to age? Well, if aging has a consequence with death, then we should not be aging to bring death. Jesus aged from a baby to a full-grown adult. What would he have done had he not have moved into a resurrected body? You know, we don't know because he didn't do it, you know. So there's a sense where nothing in our body should hinder us being able to fulfill our destiny in God. And there may be some that God takes, like Enoch and Elijah, that are just translated into another state of being without having to go through physical death. You know, and we don't know who would be those that would not remain here because they have finished their task here and move on into another perspective, like Enoch and Elijah and others have done. You know, we don't know yet. You know, some people might know that there's a time when they're not going to be here, you know, but we don't need to put death on that time. You know, there may be that I fulfilled all that I need to fulfill, so therefore this part of my destiny is fulfilled and I don't need to be here any longer. Therefore I will just go to be there. So there will be a transformation, I think, in the nature of our physical being at some stage or in process, whichever way it is going. Hi everyone, we're starting a Patreon page and we would like to invite you to partner with us. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/freedomarc. Partner with us in taking the message of God's unconditional love, limitless grace, triumphant mercy to a bigger global audience.